How you doing? So today, folks, we are doing a tier list of Eminem albums. We have all 12 studio albums released in Eminem's solo career. And I'm doing this video as a sort of follow-up to my previous Eminem video, which, by the way, is performing incredibly well. It's got nearly 10,000 views, and it's gotten me up to like 500 subscribers at this point, which is just crazy, and I never would have imagined that it would have gotten that type of response. And I am super grateful to everyone who stuck it out through that video, and especially grateful to those who offered your insightful information and recommendations into other hip-hop artists in the comment section. However, for right now, we are going to do the Eminem discography. We're going to be doing a tier list of these albums here, and if you notice, part of the reason why I'm doing this is because we get to include the death of Slim Shady, Coup de Grace, here, which is the newest Eminem release. It dropped about 3 days ago at the time of recording, so I've had a chance to listen to the whole album about 3 times all the way through, and I have some thoughts. But before we get into that, of course, we have to do this in order, so we're going to be starting with Infinite. So I'm going to be repeating myself a lot here, just by consequence of the fact that I have an existing video on the channel about Eminem's catalog. So I'm going to try to sort of synopsize my thoughts and make it a little bit more of a bite-sized version of what I actually think about all of these releases. In the case of Infinite, I think that I was pleasantly surprised with how good this album actually is. I would not be surprised if this is an above average album in the scope of 1990s hip hop, because it did come out pretty much in the middle of the decade. And because of that, the beats on this album are actually really cool. Even though Dr. Dre hadn't actually been introduced to Eminem yet, and they hadn't started their partnership yet, the beats were still really, really cool. There's some really neat sort of piano figures with some jazz extensions that I really much enjoyed. Eminem's flow on this album is actually really, really good. It's really impressive. The lyrics are great. The rhyme schemes are awesome. The delivery could definitely use a little bit of work. The delivery would evolve and get a lot better as you go down the Eminem catalog. But here in the debut, you know, you can tell that he hasn't really found his true voice yet, both literally and figuratively speaking, with the lyrics as well, because even though the lyrics are really good and they work well together, it doesn't really make as much of a statement as some of the other albums do in this catalog. So because of that reason, I'm just going to put this album into the C category. All right, next up, we're gonna talk about the Slim Shady LP. This is kind of a classic in the catalog. You know, it's the introduction of Eminem's partnership with Dr. Dre, as well as his alter ego Slim Shady. I'm gonna put this in the B tier. I think, you know, I mentioned in my previous video that I think the flow on this album is a little bit of a step down from Infinite. However, I think I respect this album more just because of the statements that it makes and the emphatic personality and identity that Eminem is exuding onto his audience here. He's much more confident with what he wants to say, and there are some really neat storytelling moments on this album as well. If we go ahead and look at the track listing here, we have My Name Is, you know, an excellent opener. It's got the Lobby Cipher sample, which is an amazing beat. We have Guilty Conscience, which is an incredible feat of storytelling. Brain Damage is a really great story there. 97 Bonnie and Clyde really grew on me since I recorded that previous video. The way that he kind of baby talks to Haley while he's talking about thoroughly messed up stuff is really hilarious. Role Model is pretty catchy. That's nice. My Fault is actually one of the songs that has really grown on me. This album has some spotty moments, you know, as most of the other Eminem albums do, but yeah, I think it deserves to sit in the B tier. Not quite A category, but you know, B is fine for me here. So next up, we're gonna get into the Marshall Mathers LP, and you know, if you haven't already seen my video, then I love this album. I actually have it right here. I mean, you have Kill You, which is quite possibly like my favorite Eminem song ever. We also have Stan, which is just one of the best storytelling songs of all time. Not even just hip hop, just of all time. Who Knew is amazing. The Way I Am has this incredible flow that just persists all the way through. The Real Slim Shady, again, that's another contender for the greatest Eminem song of all time. Probably the greatest beat that Dr. Dre has ever created. I'm Back is another great beat. Oh my god, the bass guitar performance on that song is incredible. The title track, Marshall Mathers, I mean, again, the lyrics are less than acceptable. But I mean, he's just saying all this stuff for shock value, let's be honest. The backup vocals in Drug Ballad are so tasty. Amityville, I mean, that chorus, his delivery on the chorus alone is just so gnarly and awesome. I mentioned it in my last video, but Kim is an absolute masterpiece, as upsetting as it is. Under the Influence is catchy. Criminal is an amazing closing track. I mean, there is not a single miss on this album, and for that reason, I'm going to put it up in the S tier. Big surprise, the Marshall Mathers LP makes it to the S tier. You thought I was going to be controversial. Well, you thought right, but you're going to have to wait a couple of albums before that happens. The Eminem Show. This is, this is solidly A tier. I'm gonna definitely stick that right in the A tier. It's a very solid album all the way through. This album has excellent beats, and the lyrics, flow, and delivery that Eminem is cooking up here on this album is just top notch. I mean, you really get the sense that he is absolutely in the prime of his game, and he has just reached this zenith in his technical skill and storytelling ability that is just totally indicative of his capacity to rap. We have White America, the awesome opening track, which makes some interesting statements about the good old US of A. Business is a really cool anthemic track. I mean, it doesn't really talk about anything serious, but I mean, I don't really need it to. Cleaning Out My Closet is an excellent storytelling song. Square Dance, you got the redneck accent in the chorus, but I can forgive it because it's got an amazing hook and freaking beat. Soldier has some of the most impressive flow that I've ever heard. I mean, Without Me is an absolute freaking bop. Sing for the Moment still kind of, rubs me the wrong way a little bit. Every time I hear it, I'm just like, yeah, this is an Aerosmith song. Superman's awesome. It's funny. Say What You Say is really badass. Till I Collapse is just an absolute anthem. It's a really great inspirational song. Eminem albums have this really interesting quality to them in that each one sounds and feels very distinct from the next, and each one feels like sort of its own era in the story arc of the Eminem catalog, and this one is his sort of theatrical, triumphant one. That's one of my favorite parts of Eminem is his proclivity toward theatrical presentation. So yeah, that's going to be in the A tier. Not quite up to snuff with the Marshall Mathers LP, but it's still a really solid, amazing album. Next up, we're gonna move on to Encore, and I think I'm gonna stick this one in the C tier. This one's a little bit rough. You have pretty cool songs like Evil Deeds, for example. It's a pretty great opening track. But then you get further into the track listing, and you come across these songs like My First Single and Puke, and it's like, man, this album's kind of falling apart. Some of you guys actually let me know that was because apparently half of these songs were actually leaked before the album came out, so we had to replace a lot of those, which is why the album seems a little bit rushed and sort of haphazardly put together. And that is a legitimate justification, but it doesn't change the fact that it's just kind of a mediocre album. Moving on to Relapse. Now, if you guys watched my video, then you will know that I absolutely love Relapse. I'm going to stick it up in the A tier above the Eminem Show. Relapse is the most consistent Eminem album in the discography because you have Dr. Dre producing virtually every song on it. Also, the lyrics, the flow, and the delivery are all just completely consistent throughout the album. I mean, it stays at this upper echelon of quality and just never drops from that level. The opening skit, Dr. West, is very theatrical. It kind of opens the idea of a concept album to the listener, and then you go straight into 3 a.m. and you're introduced to these weird experimentations with his voice. I know a lot of people are not super keen on all the accents that are used on this record, but I actually kind of enjoy them, to be honest. Yeah, Relapse is incredible. It's freaking awesome. All right, let's talk about Recovery. I mentioned this in the last video, but to me, I think Recovery seems like sort of the polar opposite twin of Relapse. It's like yin and yang. Relapse is really dark and experimental and audacious, whereas Recovery is a little bit more light. It's triumphant, and at the same time, it's a little bit of a safer album. So it really doesn't have the same edge that Relapse does. I gotta say that some of the instrumentals are a little bit lacking on this album. Of course, after listening to an entire album produced by Dr. Dre, it's gonna be pretty disappointing going into an album with songs that are not produced by Dr. Dre. I think he's only listed as the producer for like one song, if I remember correctly. Yeah, I mean, some of the lyrics on Cinderella Man are pretty cool. I think the Untitled track is easily the most entertaining track to listen to on this thing. The hook on the Rihanna song is actually pretty cool, not to mention the sort of anthem Not Afraid, which is this sort of triumphant sounding song. And it's just kind of funny because this guy has set himself up in his first 6 albums to be this really like crass guy that doesn't care about anything, and then all of a sudden he's like taking a stand for everybody, and he's gonna be the hero that has overcome the battles. It's like it's kind of a weird vibe, but you know, overall it's a pretty solid effort. I would put it in the B tier, probably below the Slim Shady LP. I just don't think it makes as much of a statement. The Marshall Mathers LP 2. Okay, so this is a really ambitious project for Eminem. I mean, he is firing in all cylinders when it comes to lyrics and flow. This guy is spitting double entendres like it's nobody's business. Bad Guy is a really cool sequel to Stan. I think it's excellent storytelling. Rhyme or Reason is a pretty great song. I especially like the you know, parallel modulation in the chorus where Eminem's voice goes from the minor 3 to the major 3 at the end. So Much Better is really a bop, honestly. The song Legacy, in the discography review video, I mentioned that it sounds like they conferenced in Eminem's part through a Motorola Razr, and you know, that was sort of just a throwaway joke in the video, but a lot of you guys let me know that was actually an artistic decision because he is you know, slowly gaining more confidence in himself, and so you know, you can hear his voice just a little bit clearer each verse, which is symbolic of that fact. Berserk, I didn't like it when I first heard it, and I still don't. It's just really not good. The production is awful. Rap God is freaking awesome. I love that. It's just a classic song. You know, I've heard it ever since middle school. Again, Rap God is just one of those indicators that he is really not messing around on this album. I mean, he is ambitious, he's hungry, he is just really trying his best here to make something impressive. And he mostly succeeds, but the thing about this album is that the beats are just lackluster. I really don't like the production on this album. Another Rihanna feature here with the Monster, which is pretty cool. I actually think this one is catchier than the last one on Recovery. Evil Twin is an excellent closer. You know, it kind of circles back and meets end to end on that kind of vibe that this album was going for the first 4 or 5 tracks. And yeah, overall, I think it's a really ambitious project, and I respect it for that reason, but I think the beats unfortunately kind of drag it down to the top of B tier. But it is at the top of B tier. I'm going to put it above the Slim Shady LP for sure. All right, next up we have Revival, which, you know, there's a lot of hate for this album I've noticed, and you don't even have to go on the internet for that. I mean, you can just listen to Eminem's songs, and he will reference the fact that this album was just thoroughly crapped on. I don't really see why it was crapped on as much as it was. I mean, yeah, it's really not as good as some of his other projects, but I really don't think it's that bad. I mean, the worst thing I can say about this album is that it's just kind of boring, you know? I mean, it's not very memorable. Like, Walk on Water is fine. Like, he's talking about like living up to the pressure of what he once was and trying to recapture that magic. But again, it's like, it comes across as corny when he's trying to be serious for the whole song. At the end of it, he's like I wrote Stan. Like, yeah, we know. This River song featuring Ed Sheeran is just really, really bad. I don't know what's up with this Revival interlude. It's like he just needed an extra track or something. The Alicia Keys feature is just really forgettable. Bad Husband is almost like this weird humble brag. I do actually really like Castle and a Rose. These two songs at the end are really harrowing, and it's a great storytelling moment from Eminem again. But yeah, overall, I mean, there's just so much unneeded fat that needed to be trimmed from this album. So yeah, I'll probably put it in the C tier, like between Encore and Infinite. I think that sounds good. Kamikaze easily goes in the D tier for me. It's my least favorite Eminem project. It was born out of hate. It came out like less than a year after Revival, and it's basically just him crapping on anyone he wants to. And I like the concept of that. Like, you know, I really welcome the idea of an angry Eminem, because that's what made the Marshall Mathers LP so good. But it's he doesn't have the same resources as he did back then in terms of like beat sensibility, if that makes sense. Like the beats on the Marshall Mathers LP are freaking transcendental. They're really good, but the beats on this are just really like crappy trap beats that, again, I really don't like trap beats. It's only got 13 tracks, and it just feels kind of half-baked. And again, it came out like less than a year after Revival, so that's understandable, but still, like, I wish it just kind of had some more time in the oven. I don't know why everybody hates Venom. Like, it's a cool, I don't know, it's a cool song. Like, what the hell? And The Ringer is actually a really cool opening track. I like The Ringer a lot, but, you know, pretty much everything in between the first and the last song I could really couldn't care less about. All right, Music to Be Murdered By. This was the most recent Eminem project before the death of Slim Shady came out 3 days ago. 3 days ago at the time of recording. I don't know how long it's going to take to edit this thing. Nonetheless, I think this was actually a pretty cool project by him. I think it's definitely a step up from Revival and Kamikaze. I think it's sort of a return to form. He is back to his mischievous sort of cheeky self. The chorus on I Will is pretty cool. Premonition is a really cool opening track. You got the little Alfred skits that kind of break up the songs. It's a nice change of pace. Godzilla is an obvious standout track with the amazing feature from Juice WRLD, and you also have the really cool storytelling track Stepdad. I really like that song. Overall, it's a really solid Eminem album, and I think I'm probably going to stick it... I'll stick it at the end of B tier. No, you know what? Actually, I'm gonna put it above Recovery. All right, and we have arrived at the final Eminem album here, The Death of Slim Shady, Coup de Grace. Let's go ahead and look up the track listing here. I gotta say that it's a pretty solid album in terms of lyrics and flow. It's definitely the best since the Marshall Mathers LP 2. And I think he definitely sounds a lot more comfortable and measured than he was in the last couple of releases, which has pros and cons. Obviously, the pros is that, he sounds a lot more natural and he sounds a lot less bitter. But I mean, the downside to that is that the delivery is a little bit stagnant sometimes. I find that he sort of sounds a little bit bored on some of these tracks. I really don't like the trap beats that are on some of these songs, but I mean the trap beats I can tolerate that as long as he's spitting some interesting stuff, which he definitely is. The beat on Brand New Dance is really weird. I don't really know what's going on with that sort of phasing thing in the instruments. Evil sounds like it could be a song from one of the 2000s albums. Like it's the hook is absolutely reeking of like 2002 Eminem. Lucifer and Antichrist are a sort of a cute little duo of songs that I think go really well together. It's pretty cool. The whole concept of this album is pretty neat. I like the sort of thematic through line that he's going for here. The song Fuel is featuring JID, but of course I forgot about his inclusion by the end of it because Eminem just absolutely overshadowed him with his verse. Houdini was the first track, the first single that came out for this album. And, I really like the beat on this. I like the flow as well. It's sort of a clone of Without Me. I think Guilty Conscience 2 is probably my favorite song on this album. It's an absolute standout track. It's really interesting how he presents this conflict between Marshall Mathers and Slim Shady. The fact that he sort of relied on this alter ego to get him to where he was, but then, he sort of regrets some of the stuff that he says, but it's sort of like trying to overcome the habit of slipping back into this persona. Temporary, Somebody Save Me, those two are really sweet songs. I really like those. Bad One is really catchy. Toby was the second single that came out for this album before the actual record dropped, and I really freaking hated it. Babytron and Big Sean just adopt this mind-numbingly monotonous flow throughout the entire thing. It's literally just triplets. That's what they're doing. The whole time they're just going da 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 da. Yeah, it's just really awful. Overall, this is a really solid release. I think that it's a really solid set of tracks, and it seems like Eminem has a lot to say on this record, and I think I can't really say that about Music to Be Murdered By. It's a concept that he executes pretty well. Honestly, it's probably going above Music to Be Murdered By for me. It's going to sit solidly in the B tier, not quite up to the original Slim Shady LP, but you know, I'd say it sits right in the middle there. That's a pretty good spot for it. So there's my Eminem album tier list. Once again, thank you everybody that watched my Eminem discography review. I really appreciate everyone who watched it and commented and gave it a like and even subscribed to the channel because of it. I definitely plan on doing some more music review videos in the future, whether it be about other hip-hop artists such as Kendrick Lamar or Nas, or, you know, I've been thinking of doing a discography review of some of the bands that I actually grew up listening to, like Queen or Rush or something like that. As I mentioned in the last video, I'm sort of a prog rock fan, so, you know, this whole hip-hop thing is sort of new to me. But I definitely did enjoy my journey through Eminem's catalog. I hope you guys enjoyed this little exercise, and I hope you guys enjoyed the death of Slim Shady. Let me know what you guys thought about the new album, or let me know what I got wrong on this tier list. I'll catch you later, everybody. Don't do drugs.